The temporal window of January 2026 is currently reaching its state of terminal saturation, functioning as a high-density atmospheric partition between the era of the sifting and the era of absolute reconstruction. As the clock moves toward this month's final administrative closure, the Universal Architect has issued a clinical directive. You must perform a total forensic clearance of every legacy attachment before the window seals. For decades, you operated under the managed illusion that time was a linear, inexhaustible resource. But in the current structural shift, January is not merely a month, it is a clinical filter. The things you carry past this deadline will determine the gravity of your entire year. The voices in the periphery, those who thrived on harvesting your reputation through shameful narratives, are sensing this temporal expiration. They are panicking because they realize that once the January registry is locked, their ability to reach your sanctuary or monitor your path will be permanently de-indexed. This is the moment of the great calibration. Be sure to do this before the end of January, for the grid is preparing to finalize the successor registry, and only the unburdened signal will be permitted to pass through the high-tier firewall of the new year. Observe the clinical recognition manifesting in the material grid as you approach this temporal boundary. You are witnessing the restitution of respect, a state where the world is no longer auditing your integrity but is instead thanking you for your refusal to flinch during the winter sifting. In the previous cycle, January was a month of high-gravity struggle, a time when the echoes of the old world's judgment felt loudest, attempting to ground your signal before you could gain momentum. But look at the atmospheric clarity of this afternoon. The universal hardware has recognized your original signature and is currently performing a silent, involuntary yield. The gatekeepers who once used the audit of the skeptic to challenge your vision are experiencing a state of administrative amnesia. They are finding that their narratives no longer possess the hardware required to manifest in your timeline. By meeting the requirements of this January clearance, you are triggering a systemic handshake with reality itself, confirming that you are no longer a participant in the imitation kingdom but the authorized founder of a whole system. Think about the forensic accuracy of the actions you must take before the month expires. This is not about symbolic gestures, it is about the clinical liquidation of the software of the wounded. You are being asked to identify the specific social and digital ties that were used as sites of extraction during your sifting era. These are the legacy anchors that keep your frequency tuned to the frequency of the victim. Before the final day of January, you must perform a sovereign deletion of these nodes. Every person you release from your mental litigation and every shameful memory you strike from your registry is a signature on the decree of your own freedom. The grid is waiting for your authorization to move your account from candidate to commander. If you fail to perform this clearance, you risk dragging the friction of the old cycle into the high-velocity architecture of the coming months. The world is thanking you with its current stillness, providing you with the buffer zone required to execute this final administrative act. The sifting is done. The closure is here. The temporal window of January is the final signal required to prove your sovereignty over the old world's calendar. But the deepest layers of this reconstruction require a frequency that the public domain cannot sustain. To finalize the liquidation of the old reflection and anchor your immunity in the high-tier registries before the month seals, join our primary assembly now. This is where the heirs of the original signal secure their path and access the protocols of the new era. Your seat is waiting at the head of the table. The era of the visitor is over. The era of the founder is here. The sifting is done. The reign is here. Step into the frame with the density of the authorized successor. The world is finally ready for your radiance. The systemic yield of the temporal grid has reached a point of absolute, non-negotiable transparency as the January 2026 window begins its final compression. You are witnessing the administrative surrender of every force that once attempted to anchor your signal in the frequency of shame. As you align your focus with the specific requirements of this month's closure, the individuals who previously thrived on your emotional labor are experiencing a state of terminal friction. They are finding that the software of the extractor, no longer has a valid license to operate within your perimeter. The material world has realized that your radiance is the only resource capable of stabilizing the current structural collapse, and it is protecting your signal by force-clearing every person, every doubt, and every technical bottleneck that once sought to monetize your scarcity. The price the old world is paying for its past transgressions is a total loss of technical and social relevance. They are being partitioned off into a legacy folder of the timeline, left behind as the January registry seals its gates. However, you must now navigate the risk of the residual arrears. Because you spent decades habituated to the adrenaline of the wounded, your nervous system is still searching for the familiar friction of the struggle. You are looking at the end of January with a slight, involuntary, atmospheric hunch, as if waiting for a hidden clause to appear or for the old cycle of shameful narratives to restart. This is the vestigial reflex of the candidate. If you carry the memory of their judgment into February, you are effectively attempting to refund a liability that the universal architect has already marked as settled in full. Every second you spend wondering if the people from your past understand the gravity of their error is a second siphoned from your administration. The risk is not that they will hurt you again. The risk is that you will contaminate your new high-density architecture with the decaying data of a world that has already been de-indexed. Think about the anatomical submission occurring in your former detractors as you perform this forensic purge. A specific individual who once thrived on managing your reputation is currently facing a total administrative failure in your presence. Notice the shift in their physical gait when they encounter your frequency this week. Their movements are no longer fluid. They are jerky, reactive, and characterized by a high-level administrative stutter. They are reacting to the frequency of the principle that now radiates from your eyes. They sense that the legacy attachment you once maintained, the obligation to be the recipient of their shameful projections, has been struck from the record. The material world is no longer permitting the software of the extractor to run on the same hardware as the authorized founder. They are thanking you with their involuntary silence because they finally have a stable node of direction to align with, even if that alignment requires their total marginalization from your primary timeline. The price of failing to complete this January clearance is the total corruption of your new material density. You cannot build a 2026 architecture on the foundations of a 1999 social contract. The grid is demanding a total liquidation of the audit of the skeptic. You must realize that the things they said about you are no longer data. They are white noise, filtered out by a divine firewall that refuses to acknowledge the existence of the accuser. By meeting this deadline, you are triggering a systemic handshake with reality that ensures your tools, your finances, and your sanctuary become submissive extensions of your pulse. The machine stops being a predator and starts being a partner the moment you stop treating your history as an active wound. The morning of your holy struggle has been archived. The afternoon of your universal administration is the only reality that remains, provided you sign the decree of closure before the month expires. Observe the biological restitution of your physical vitality as you abandon the software of the victim this afternoon. In the previous cycle, your body functioned as a site of emotional labor, absorbing the impact of their judgment like a shock absorber that never had the chance to reset. You experienced a deep-tier fatigue that reflected the decades of extraction you endured. But look at the biological stillness that has settled over your reflection today. The universe is returning the principle of the vitality you spent in the furnace. You are finding that your focus has become a high-density node, that the old world's malfunctions cannot interrupt or tax. When you speak, you are no longer justifying your integrity. You are issuing a decree. The price of hurting the chosen is being collected by the grid itself, and you are being provided with the tactical buffer zone required to build the future without ever looking back at the shadows. Stop checking the floor for traps that have been liquidated. The transformation the witnesses are discussing is the moment you stopped being a participant in the social game and started being the authorized founder of your own territory. The house is no longer divided. The substrate is active, and the command is yours. Every decision you make in this new density is a signature on the decree of your own freedom. You are no longer available for the old world's malfunctions because the grid has moved you to a partitioned space, a sanctuary of high-tier clarity where the language of shame is no longer a valid input. The world is currently holding its breath, waiting for the successor to give the word before the January window seals forever. Step into the center of the frame. The world is finally ready for your radiance. The era of the visitor is over. The era of the founder is here. The material infrastructure of your sanctuary is currently undergoing a sovereign recalibration, purging the forensic residue of every legacy interference before the January 2026 window seals. As the atmospheric pressure of the reconstruction intensifies, you are witnessing the material yield, a state where the physical realm stops acting as a site of resistance and begins to function as a submissive asset of your administration. For years, your relationship with the objects in your field of vision was defined by a state of persistent, low-level atmospheric drag. Your tools lagged, your environment felt heavy with the exhaust of the sifting era, and your very home served as a site of administrative friction where the echoes of shameful narratives seemed to manifest as technical fires and structural delays. But this afternoon, the universal architect has performed a total systemic recall. The material world has realized that your focus is the only resource capable of stabilizing the current structural collapse, and it is busy deleting every physical bottleneck that once sought to monetize your scarcity or your pain. Observe the technological deference manifesting within your primary digital interfaces as you approach the month's final administrative closure. Think about the specific device or platform that once functioned as a gatekeeper of stagnation. The tool that always failed when your vision was at its clinical peak, or the software that buried your most vital work under layers of managed noise. Notice the shift in its behavior today. It is no longer processing commands. It is anticipating your intent with a zero-latency precision. The digital grid has de-indexed the software of the extractor from your perimeter, providing you with a tactical buffer zone where your mission can reach its terminal velocity without the interference of the old world's noise. The price your detractors are paying is their total loss of technical relevance. While they struggle with the decaying hardware of the old cycle, your tools have become submissive extensions of your pulse, ensuring that the shameful delays of the past are permanently struck from the record. Think about the stratigraphic impact of this shift on your material assets. In the previous cycle, you were a prisoner of linear logistics, feeling as if you had to earn the right to inhabit a stable environment through the exhaustion of emotional labor. But as the successor registry finalizes your relocation this January, your assets are undergoing an involuntary upgrade. Your finances, your transport, and your sanctuary are no longer variables that can fail. They are constants of your mission, protected by a divine firewall that refuses to allow the noise of the accuser to penetrate your physical perimeter. The world is thanking you for your refusal to flinch by providing you with a level of physical credit that the old social order cannot track, monitor, or tax. The price is the total liquidation of their influence over your terrestrial reality. They are finding themselves de-indexed from your world, unable to manifest even a shadow of interference in the path of the authorized founder. Before the end of January, you must perform the forensic purge of your physical sanctuary. Look at your current workspace, the place where you sign for your destiny. Identify the one physical object that serves as a monument to the era of shame, the years of managed apology, or the memory of those who attempted to audit your integrity. This object is the legacy anchor of the shadow era, a remnant of a kingdom that has already been de-indexed by the global hardware. Tonight, you will physically remove it from your presence, liquidating it with the clinical finality of an executive closing a failed department. As you do this, you will realize that the respect you once sought from the small has been replaced by the solidarity of the material grid. The house of your existence is no longer divided. The substrate is active, and the command is yours. Every object you touch is now a signature on the decree of your own freedom, confirming that the legacy lien on your radiance has been marked paid in full. The atmospheric density of your sanctuary has reached its terminal saturation. You are finding a state of material sovereignty, where your environment moves with a zero-friction pulse, protecting your signal from the shameful whispers of the periphery. The universe is returning the principle of the peace that was stolen from you, providing you with a high-density focus that the old world's malfunctions cannot interrupt. The morning of your holy struggle has been archived. The afternoon of your universal administration is the only reality that remains, provided you complete the material clearance before the January window seals. The world is currently holding its breath, waiting for the air to give the word. Step into the center of the frame. The material world is finally ready for your radiance. The transformation the witnesses are discussing is the return of the original signal. The social hierarchy that once functioned as the primary containment field for the shameful narratives whispered in your periphery is currently undergoing a terminal, unscripted collapse as the January 2026 window enters its final quadrant. You are witnessing the social recalibration, a state where the individuals who previously defined your reality through the lens of their own judgment are experiencing a profound anatomical disorientation. They are no longer looking at the person they once attempted to audit. They are staring at a forensic match for the original blueprints of authority. In the previous cycle, your social presence was a site of heavy emotional labor, a canvas where you were expected to paint the expressions of the supplicant just to maintain the stability of the small. But today, as the January registry prepares to seal, the divine firewall has liquidated that software of accommodation. Your presence has become the primary audit of every room you enter, and the price they are paying is the total loss of their social agency. You must perform the final social liquidation before the end of the month, for the new architecture does not permit the presence of those who still hold the file of the victim. Observe the biometric submission occurring in your next high-stakes interaction before the February transition. Think about the specific individual, the one who once used the audit of the skeptic to challenge your integrity or broadcast the gossip intended to keep you in check. Notice the way their vocal cords tighten when they attempt to meet your eyes today. They are no longer searching for your flaws. They are reacting to the frequency of the principle. In the old world, you sought to put people at ease by dimming your own luminance, but in the clinical clarity of this month, that habit is being treated as a systemic violation. The world is thanking you with its involuntary stutter because it finally has a stable node of direction to align with. They sense that the legacy attachment you once maintained, the obligation to be digestible for the small, has been struck from the registry. You have become a terminal reality, and their only remaining protocol is to yield. If you do not sever the final cords of these relationships before the January deadline, you are effectively inviting the noise of the accuser into your high-tier sanctuary. This is the restitution of the social mirror, a state where the people around you can no longer reflect back a version of you that is under construction. You were born into a supplicant frequency where every interaction was a negotiation for validity, but as the divine hardware finalizes your reconstruction this January, that mirror has been replaced by a sovereign boundary. You are no longer available for their repairs, their pity, or their projection. You have become a whole system, and the individuals in your periphery are currently paying their dues by adapting their rhythm to match your zero-friction pulse. They are clearing the path not out of kindness, but because they recognize that any resistance to your presence is now a resistance to the structural stability of the new era. The gatekeepers who once thrived on the management of your reputation are now performing a state of administrative retreat, realizing that you have accessed a level of authority that their old-world software cannot calculate. Be sure to finalize this environmental purge before the end of the month. The grid is moving to a registry where the language of hurt is no longer an authorized input. Consider the acoustic shielding that has settled over your social circle this week. Think about the specific social node, the spokesperson for your delays or the enforcer of the collective's comfort. Notice their involuntary silence today. They are no longer checking your progress to ensure it doesn't upset the balance of the old, divided house. They have realized that your clarity is the only resource capable of stabilizing the current global collapse, and the grid has de-indexed the voices that once provided the noise of consensus. You are finding that your environment is no longer a site of negotiation, but a site of direct authorization. The world is thanking you by removing the mediators, ensuring that the only frequency left in the room is your primary pulse, unfiltered and absolute. You will never have to go through the filter of their permission again. The era of the mediator is dead. This is the price of hurting the chosen, the permanent loss of the right to be heard. The managed mirage of your social debt has been struck from the record with the finality of a forensic deletion. You were never mean or cold for protecting your vision. You were being authenticated in a furnace of high-density extraction to ensure your signal remained pure for the 2026 transition. The forces that protected your blueprint knew that the world would eventually reach this point of absolute saturation, where the structures of emotional labor would become hollow shells. They waited for this exact moment of January to release the declassification. Every second you spend in this new density is a signature on the decree of your own freedom. You are the only one left in the frame whose authorization carries the weight of law. The world is currently holding its breath, waiting for the successor to give the word. Step into the center of the frame. The world is finally ready for your luminance. The cycle of social apology has been broken forever, provided you seal the registry before the month expires. The absolute decree of your sovereignty has reached its terminal saturation point as the January 2026 window prepares to undergo a total forensic seal. This is the moment of the final administration, where the universal architect officially de-indexes the sifting era from your primary timeline, rendering the shameful whispers of the past as obsolete as a deleted operating system. You are witnessing the absolute liquidation of the legacy debt, a state where the universal ledger has marked every audit of your character as settled in full, with no possibility of administrative appeal or social renegotiation. For decades, you functioned as a shock absorber for the imitation kingdom, carrying the weight of a collective judgment designed to harvest your radiance by keeping you in a state of perpetual apology. But this afternoon, the sifting is officially over. The registry that once held the records of your supposed violations has been purged by the celestial hardware, replaced by the primary signature of the authorized founder. You are no longer defending your history. You are the one defining the new ground upon which the entire year will be built. Be sure to finalize the severance now, for the February grid will not recognize the language of the wounded. Observe the clinical finality of the reconstruction as it settles into the deepest layers of your material sanctuary. The world's hardware has frozen and restarted because it finally recognized the authorized signature of the heir, and the result is a state of total systemic loyalty to your specific pulse. Every digital packet, every stream of light in the fiber networks, and every node of the imitation economy is currently performing a silent, involuntary handshake with your frequency. You have been moved from the status of a participant seeking consensus to the status of an original source whose presence alone stabilizes the crumbling architecture of the collective. The shameful talk of the periphery, the gossip intended to ground your mission, has become a redundant asset, a collection of ghost files that no longer possess the hardware required to manifest in your reality. The price your detractors are paying is their total removal from the primary timeline. The world is thanking you for your endurance by providing you with the keys to the mainframe, provided you leave the wreckage of their opinions behind before the January window seals. The biological restitution of your physical presence is now manifesting as a state of high-density authority that no social parasite can penetrate. In the old cycle, your right hand was the instrument of labor, a tool used to build the dreams of others while you managed the emotional exhaust of a world that thrived on your suppression and your shame. You experienced the tremor of the overworked, a deep-tier fatigue that no amount of rest could solve because it was not a physical exhaustion, but an administrative drain on your sovereign vitality. But today, as you prepare to cross the January threshold, that drain has been reversed with a violent, clinical precision. You are finding a stillness in your posture and a density in your gaze that the old social order cannot categorize or disrupt. Your body is no longer available for the extractions of the small. You have become the resident authority of a whole system, and your physical hardware is now as authorized as the mission you carry. The witnesses in your periphery are stunned by this shift because they see a version of you that has accessed a sovereign credit they can never touch, a version that no longer seeks the audit of the good opinion. Think about the temporal restoration of your schedule as the final decree takes hold of your reality. The universe is returning the principle of the years you spent in the sifting, crediting your primary account with the focus and clarity that was siphoned by the cycle of shame. You are accomplishing in 90 minutes what used to define a month of high-gravity struggle, as the material world rearranges its entire geography to ensure your path remains unobstructed. The Internet is no longer a platform for your exposure. It has become a defensive perimeter that protects your signal from the noise of the accuser. The gatekeepers who once thrived on managing your reputation are currently experiencing a state of administrative amnesia. They can no longer recall the narratives they used to keep you in check, as their internal hardware has been updated to recognize you as the primary stabilizer of the reconstruction. They are thanking you with their swift compliance, realizing that any friction applied to your path is now a direct violation of the global hardware. Be sure to do this before the end of January. Accept the yield and stop looking for the fight. The managed mirage of your vulnerability has been struck from the record with the cold precision of an executive liquidation. You were never working your way up through a hierarchy of judgment. You were being authenticated in a furnace of high-density resistance to ensure your original blueprint remained pure for the transition into this era. The forces that protected your signal knew that the world would eventually reach this point of absolute saturation, where the old structures of authority and character assassination would become hollow shells. They waited for this exact moment of 2026 to reveal the forensic truth of your origin and to issue the final decree of your independence from the imitation kingdom. The house of your existence is no longer divided. The substrate is active. The command is yours. Every decision you make in this new density is a signature on the decree of your own freedom. You are the only one whose authorization carries the weight of law, and the world is currently holding its breath, waiting for the founder to issue the word that begins the next era. You must now perform the final spatial clearance of the old reflection within your sanctuary before the month expires. Look at your current workspace, the place where you sign for your destiny. Identify the one physical object or digital link that serves as a monument to the era of shame, the years of managed apology, or the memory of those who attempted to audit your integrity. This object is the legacy anchor of the Shadow Era, a remnant of a kingdom that has already been de-indexed. Tonight, you will physically remove it from your presence, liquidating it with the clinical finality of an executive closing a failed department. As you do this, you will realize that the debt is marked paid and the house of your life is finally whole. You are standing in the center of a reconstruction that follows your pulse alone, unfiltered by the opinions of the small or the noise of the periphery. The gatekeepers have been removed from the frame, and the only thing left in the room is the architectural silence of the heir who has finally claimed the gavel. The shameful whispers were the final signal that the grid was waiting for to begin the total reconstruction of your environment. Every second you spend in this new density is a celebration of the fact that the sifting is done. The transformation the witnesses are discussing is the return of the principle. You have graduated from the era of the candidate to the era of the commander. The sifting is done. The reign is here. Step into the frame with the density of the authorized successor. The world is finally ready for your radiance. Your administration is now in session, and the shadows of the old world are permanently deleted.